Awesome. Looks like we're live. Then I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Awesome. And then Vanessa, may I ask, can you see our presentation up on the screen? Thank you very much. Alrighty, hello everybody. Thank you all for joining us on this wonderful morning. Today we are going over how to transfer your social science degree into an MBA, how to be a competitive applicant, and what the MBA journey looks like. We're collaborating with Vanessa Marson, and I'll introduce her shortly. And Vanessa, she graduated from Berkeley in 2005 as a poli-sci major, and then pursued her MBA shortly after here at UCI, where she graduated in 2011. And Vanessa is very familiar with the MBA application journey she is currently UCI's MBA program and has served as Associate Director of Recruitments and Admission for UCI's MBA program. And this is a little bit about what we are going to talk about today. We're going to talk about being a competitive applicant, about the journey as a student, and then what you can do after you graduate with your MBA. And then shortly after, we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, feel free to save them towards the end, or you can type them up as you see fit, and we will tackle them at the end, okay? All righty, but with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Vanessa, and she'll be speaking about making a competitive applicant. And Vanessa, I'll hand it off to you up until the Q&A session. And if you can cue me when to head to the next slide, that would be great.
Oh, absolutely. So thank you so much for that warm introduction. First of all, it's really nice to be here. So thank you for everyone for jumping on to this virtual presentation. I know it's not always easy to pull yourself away from your other school and work commitments. So I appreciate you all being here. Just to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing now. So I'm actually working within the business school with undergraduate business administration majors. And I've been working with them for 10 years. Some of them are interested in pursuing graduate school, but the majority of them end up going on to work full time when they graduate. So I work a lot with undergraduates currently in case you are interested in what I'm doing. So I am on campus. You probably have run into me a couple of times without knowing it. And then, yes, prior to that, I was working in recruitment and admissions, and I was an MBA student myself at Mirage, graduating from 2011. So I'll just go over, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the process at this point or just the pieces of it. So I'm going to assume that you are all coming kind of with a clean slate and go over some of the basics. So if you know this, wonderful. If not, I hope you do find some takeaways from this. So the starters is work experience is going to be a primary factor when you apply for your MBA program. You'll also have a series of essays. Every school is a little bit different. To be honest with you, the recruitment and admissions team doesn't want to read like 5 essays. So the max you'll probably see is about 3, which probably includes an optional essay as well, which I can talk about that in a minute. There's also letters of recommendation. And then finally, if required, a GMAT that you'll take. You'll have already had a GPA from undergrad, which at that point is just kind of a fixed GPA. You can't do anything more about that to make that more competitive. But certainly if a school is accepting the GMAT score, then you can. One thing I will just note about the essay part of that, so a lot of the prompts will be pretty similar. What do you want to do with your MBA degree? You know, tell us why this program. One of the optional essays that people always tell me, well, I don't really know what to put. Do I have to complete that? No, the answer is no, you don't have to complete that optional essay, but it's a great place to write something additional about yourself that you think the admissions team might have questions on or might raise a red flag. So if, for example, let's say you didn't have a very strong senior year of school, maybe you had some low grades, maybe things kind of took a little bit of a nosedive and you had a couple of quarters that didn't go so well GPA-wise, the optional essay is a perfect way to explain the reasons why that happened. Maybe you were working a part-time job, maybe you had a family emergency and you had to go home and kind of make that a priority and you just didn't have time to really work hard at your studies. Anything where you can describe sort of what happened and why and kind of what you did about it are really good things to put in an optional essay. So I actually, when I was applying for school, I wrote an optional essay. Mine was actually about with my GMAT score. I had a good GMAT score, but there was a pretty big difference between the quantitative portion and kind of more of the verbal portion. So I wanted to address that and say, look, like I'm just not that great at taking these tests. Like my quant skills, my brain doesn't really operate that way. But I have been taking this calculus class. I've been doing these additional really quant focused classes, and I've gotten really good grades in them. And I attached those transcripts. So I was just trying to demonstrate to the admissions team, like, hey, you're going to see a little bit of a difference, but I'm just not really that great at test taking for math. But here's some ways that I really work to improve that quant angle and prove to you all who are reading this that I can do well in those quant heavy classes. So those are some really good examples of things that you can write about in an optional essay. So that's just kind of the different factors that you're going to be faced with when you're writing your applications. Okay, so we'll just jump to the next slide. And another question that people ask is, well, what can I get done today? What can make me competitive for the future? So, you don't want to look at your whole life for the next maybe 3 to 5 years as well. What can I do so I can get into a really good school? That's not really the best way for any of us to live, right? We don't want to just be making decisions for other people or really for this faceless group of people that are going to be reading an application and making a decision on us. So go do what interests you. So I recommend to every student when they graduate, go out and get some work experience and get the experience that really matters to you. So whether that's nonprofit work or you want to go, try something totally unique, like maybe you want to go work as a paralegal for a little while, or it's just really anything that you think you want to get exposure to and experience in. And then you can always write your essays on how that's going to help you in the business career later. So a little bit about me. Before I went to go get my MBA, I was actually in politics, which really doesn't seem to be very related to business at all. And I was working in that kind of environment for 3 years. And then it was 4 when I actually went in to get my MBA. But at the time when I was writing my applications, I had 3 years of full-time work experience in politics. So I had to explain, hey, this isn't, business focused, but here's what I learned, and here's why I found that I really want a business degree and how it can really supplement this great work experience that I had in a political environment. And that was really meaningful to the admissions committee because, first of all, it was different. They didn't see a lot of applicants that came from that kind of background. And it really showed them also how I could really kind of bridge that gap between what I had learned in politics and in business as well. So do what matters to you. You're going to be much happier about that decision. Also, of course, this goes without saying, I'm sure you hear this all the time, but just do well in your classes. Don't sacrifice everything to get a good GPA, because the admissions committee will look at that and say, well, hey, this person got a 4.0, but they didn't do anything else. So that, they're not really a whole candidate. So admissions committees tend to look at everything with a very holistic approach. So they'll take a look at the activities you were involved in. They'll take a look at what you did after school. If you are working and then volunteering at the same time. They want to see people who are full people who have full lives, not somebody that only dedicated 100% of their time to getting a good GPA. So we'll jump to the next slide. And hopefully this is helping all of you with some of the basics so far. So, and we can go to the next one, actually. Thank you. So, this is a journey that's going to be, and kind of it's not necessarily going to be all kind of uphill. It's going to go kind of in waves. So don't worry about things that you feel like are going to be setbacks to you. Those are all going to be part of your journey as you kind of approach that MBA environment. So I just want to go over a few of kind of the common questions that I get asked from students, or that I was asked in the past as an admissions professional, about whether or not an MBA is the right thing for you. So, and you can see them on the slide here, but just to kind of briefly touch upon them, not being a numbers person. You understand that business is going to be important. You want a degree in it. Like I mentioned, I'm not necessarily a numbers person, but there are ways that you can kind of beef up those strengths. And not everyone is going to excel at the same things. And that's going to be an important for the admissions committee to see too. So you don't necessarily want to go to an MBA program and then they don't want to have everybody go into the field of finance or consulting. They have people who do a lot of different things. So you really want to focus on what you do really well. And then if you feel like there are some weaknesses, try and kind of shore those up by saying, here's what I did to kind of help prepare for the quant heavy aspects of business school, because there are definitely some quant heavy classes. If you don't have the traditional business background, an MBA could still be absolutely the right fit for you. I think an MBA is a great value proposition for pretty much any student from any major. You can do a lot with it. So actually, I find that the students who don't have an undergraduate background in any type of business, but then get the MBA later, are actually going to be more fulfilled that way and actually kind of offer more to their workplaces, because now they've got a little bit of everything, right? So they come maybe from a humanities major, they've done something totally different, but then they sort of bridge that gap with business. And so now they have everything rather than someone who was a business major and then went on to do an MBA later. So that's not necessarily bad either, but I think my point here is that this could be the right decision for anybody. So don't sort of think that if you don't have the right major, it's not going to be a good fit for you. It really doesn't actually mean that much at the end of the day. The full-time and part-time one is a little bit trickier. So part of the reason why I suggest that students all give it some time once they graduate before they actually apply for business schools and sort of make that decision is because sometimes you'll find that an employer will help you pay for it, or they'll provide you some type of stipend or scholarship for part-time. That's a lot of work because you're doing that on top of a full-time job, but it does save you a lot of money. And it does kind of help with your advancement opportunities at the companies too. So you might find yourself in that kind of situation where you can actually get some of your MBA paid for. Full-time MBA is a great way to kind of get that out of the way in a shorter period of time. For full-time, it's usually, a year and 9 months. Basically, it's September through the following couple years later, so then 9 months. So it's like a year and 9 months. So almost 2 years where you're going to be going full-time for that program and then graduate right before summer. It is more expensive, but one thing I will say about going full-time is this can be especially helpful if you're trying to make a complete kind of career change, or you have the financial means and ability to basically pull yourself out of the workforce for a couple years. And there's pros and cons that go along with that. So not gaining that experience in the workforce, it doesn't necessarily set you back, because if you can get some great internships in school and you're trying to make a career shift, an MBA is really kind of the best way to do that, because it's much harder to do this when you are just working full time and then doing maybe like a part-time MBA program. So some things to consider, which probably are not going to be as top of mind now as they would be if you were 2 or 3 years out of school. So again, a really, really good reason to just kind of wait a little bit, get some work experience, and then see how you feel. So there are scholarship options for financing an MBA because it can be quite expensive, especially depending on where you go. One of the things that I always tell people that they don't think of is don't hesitate to, if you get admitted to a school, especially a school you want to go to, don't be afraid to ask if they can help give you a scholarship. So very few people would ask me as an admissions person, but if we admitted someone, especially someone competitive who we really wanted to join the class, and they said, I'm just having a tough time financially making this decision, but I really like your school. I love UCI. I really want to be here. I go back to my team and say, hey, this person needs some money. Do we have anything we could help them with? So it depends on essentially the pockets of the business school, depends on what they have that they can give you. But if you're a strong candidate and if you make it clear to the admissions team after an interview and you get admitted to the program that you're just kind of finding it to be tough to make ends meet, don't be afraid to ask if there's any type of scholarship that they can offer you. Plenty of schools offer this. Sometimes you'll get it right when you're admitted. Sometimes you have to ask for it. The worst thing that they can say is no. They'll never say, you shouldn't have asked, we're not going to admit you anymore. It doesn't work that way. They'll just say, no, I'm sorry, we can't. And then you're kind of faced with that decision. But the bright side is they could always say yes, and then you could sort of find 10 grand that you didn't have before. So the other way to finance that is by doing internships during the summer, especially with a full-time MBA. You can get work as a like a student assistant or a researcher. All those types of things can be really helpful to you. Okay, so we'll jump to the next slide. All right, so what can you do with your MBA? So that's a great question because you can literally do anything. So kind of like I talked about, I don't have a business major, maybe it's something totally different. That's fine. I think getting an MBA is even better in most cases for those people because it really helps to make you more rounded. Getting an MBA is really versatile. I mean, I'll use myself again as an example. An MBA is one of the best things that I ever did, and I'm working in career advising. I advise undergraduate students, and that's something I find very fulfilling. To be honest with you, I don't know that I would have discovered that about myself or realized that had I not gone through an MBA program. So you can truly do anything with it. So you'll kind of see the top things that um, people will go into to get an MBA: finance, consulting. Those tend to be kind of the big ones. Sometimes they just want to progress into different management roles and they look around the workplace and they say, well, this person has a master's degree or this person has an MBA. I want to go get one too, so I can kind of move up into those leadership roles. Some companies will actually even require it. That's not really something I see very often, but some of the finance companies like PIMCO, for example, which is right in our backyard in Newport Beach, they at some point tell basically everybody that they've got to get an MBA. They'll help pay for it, but that's just something that's kind of in their DNA. They want all of their employees to go on and get that, but they'll help you with it because that's something they require. But I don't see that one very often. I usually see that it's kind of, up to the person to say, I think this is something I can really benefit from to get ahead or to make a completely different career switch. So many different things you can do, so many options. Choose the school based on what you think you want to do. So if you really want to go into some sort of like high-powered consulting firm or big name finance company, apply for those schools that have those connections and tend to put different graduates there. So not to say that a place like UCI can't do that. We absolutely have students to graduate and go on to great finance and consulting careers. But if you take a look at like the East Bay, for example, like Haas, or they're very well connected with finance and consulting up in the Bay Area as well as tech. So you want to just be kind of doing your research on what are the schools that are really going to help you the most with what it is that you think you might be doing. And the location that you want to be living in too, because chances are your network is going to be from wherever you graduated. Okay, let's jump to the next question, the next slide, sorry. Oh, perfect. I was looking forward to this. I kind of, I was right. Okay, awesome. Question time. Am I able to see the questions? I'm not sure if I can. Let me see.
Yes, you should
Oh,
see
I
a
do. Yep.
Okay, awesome. A Q&A box, and students, please feel free to type in either the chat or the Q&A portion of your Zoom screen, any questions that you have for Vanessa. And
Yeah,
while we wait for the questions to populate, oh, we have one already. Awesome. We
great.
have a question, Vanessa. Does having work experience or having internships matter as much during undergrad, or will having full-time positions look stronger after graduating?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. You know, I hate to use this word, it depends, but it depends on when you're actually going to be applying for your MBA. So if you are waiting 4 or 5 years down the road, then the bulk of your experience really has been in full-time work. So an admissions committee is going to be looking primarily at the kinds of full-time jobs you've had in the past 4 or 5 years and also what kind of advancement you've had. So, for example, if they see that you've spent the past 4 or 5 years working the same exact job and kind of never moving up or taking on any different positions or taking on more responsibility, that might signal to them that maybe you're not really trying as hard to sort of get promoted or become advanced or learn more. Now, that's kind of a very general statement, but you want to be thinking about, how that's going to be reflected to the admissions committee. So if they're looking at somebody who's had 4 or 5 years where they've just been in the same role doing the exact same thing that whole period of time, that won't look as competitive as somebody who's actually shown some progression in their company. So that's if you're applying 4 or 5 years out. Now, if you are going to be applying, let's say a couple years out, you've had 2 years of work experience and you're going, I really want to apply for my MBA, then they're going to look both at your full-time job, but then also at what you did in your undergrad. So if you had some great internships or if you had work experience, they'll factor that in as well because you're applying with not very much experience. So that's the time in which your experience in undergrad is really going to matter a lot more. So if you haven't had a whole lot of professional work experience as an undergrad, then I would recommend you get more experience before going into an MBA program. I think that's going to be the wiser choice. You'll benefit more from it. You'll be a better participant. If you've had some really strong internships in undergrad, or you've been working part-time, you've got some good work experience, and you want to apply in a couple years, then all of that is going to matter to the admissions committee. And I think that's fine too. So the key here is really that you've had some work experience. So I hope that that helps answer your question. Please feel free to follow up if there's something I didn't answer. Let's see, I can answer the next one, looking for internships in the business field. That's a great question. So all of you who are UCI students have access to Handshake. Handshake, I know, can be like kind of a beast. There's a lot to go through, but you can filter and take a look for different internship opportunities. I would also try and get really involved in the clubs on campus that are within the functional areas that you think you might be interested in. So Undergraduate Business Association, the Marketing Association, accounting and BAP is great. There's an HR organization on campus. I mean, there's an entertainment one too, if you're looking into the entertainment industry. So what's great about the clubs is they put on a lot of their own events. They bring back their own employers. That is really, really awesome to sort of take advantage of. Lastly, I would say don't underestimate the importance of networking. So if you're interested, I'm just going to say marketing as an example, just throwing it out there. If you're interested in marketing and you're thinking about, oh, I think I want to do marketing, I'm not really sure. LinkedIn is your friend. That's where you can reach out to students who have graduated or even your own peers. If you take a look at LinkedIn profiles, chances are there's someone in your major or in another major on campus, like a business admin student, who's doing something that you want to do. Pick their brain on how they got that role, or see if they can introduce you to somebody who can kind of help you sort of get in with a company or get to know the role a little bit more. So don't underestimate the power of going to events and connecting with other students. That's going to be really, really helpful for you in learning what you want to do and in also finding internships as well. As far as working experience, that's another question on there that admissions teams prefer. So it used to be a lot more than it is now, and it's also dependent upon the school. So back when I was applying, it used to be like 4 or 5 years was kind of like the average that you would get before you went back and got your MBA. I think when I enrolled, I had 4 years of full-time work experience. Now it can be a little bit lower. So I've seen a lot of students enter after they've had 3 years of work experience, which means they start applying when they've had 2 years. Because it's a year-long cycle, you might start applying during the summer or early September to get in that following year. So you might only have a couple years of experience and then get in after 3 full years. There really is no preference that's kind of across the board. I would say 3 to 5 years is a good range that most will look for. But because it's dependent upon school and the program, I would look at the schools that you're interested in and see the average. So most of them will fall between the 3 to 5 years, but you'll see that some schools might be a little bit lower, might be closer to like 3 years of work experience. Those might be ones you want to target if you feel like you have a little bit less experience and you're kind of looking into those types of schools. If you have less experience, it's going to be a little bit more competitive just because you don't have the work experience, but you can kind of enhance your application by having a really good GMAT score, having great letters of recommendation, things like that to help boost you if you're like, I've got 3 years, but my dream school really kind of wants 4 or maybe even 5. Try to beef up your application in other ways. Do the internships and work experience that you have to be in the business field? No. So, again, just using myself, I'm an easy example. When I got my MBA, I had all political science background. I mean, that's what I did in school, and then that's what I did in the workplace. And my internships, and part-time jobs when I was an undergrad were like in entertainment. I did a lot of that kind of stuff. So totally different, but I just followed what I like to do and kind of just what made me tick. And all of that was part of learning about myself and gaining experience. So what it will really come down to is finding the right school that's a good fit for you and writing those essays in a way that you can kind of connect what you did and how that translates to business school. Okay, we've got someone here who's going to be applying to the MSBA program. That's awesome. So, GMAT's not as competitive, GMAT's not as high. Okay, so great. This is a question really about, how competitive do you have to be in all the pieces? Because remember what we talked about that first slide, there's really like 5 different pieces, right? GPA is one of them. GMAT score is another one of them, letters of recommendation. So all those pieces. The MSBA program, just in case you guys are curious, we have some different one-year programs that are masters at the Paul Mirage School. So there's a Master's of Finance. This student's applying for the Master's of Business Analytics program. Great program. It's great for students who are applying straight out of undergrad. So Caitlin, the good news is that, the average number of years of work experience is like 0 to 1 for the MSBA. Of course, there's some differences, but they are looking at students who are recent graduates. So as far as being competitive there, you're kind of like right within that process. If you're feeling like your GPA is just not matching up and your GMAT score isn't that high, so first of all, if they will accept the GRE, you can consider taking something a little bit different. Some students will do better on the GRE than the GMAT. Of course, if you've sure you've already thought about retaking the GMAT, you can do that. I wouldn't take it more than 3 times. If you are going, yeah, I've done all that kind of stuff in essay, but it's just still not that great, what you can do, make sure you've got really good essays, make sure you have a good resume, make sure you have some really strong letters of recommendation. A lot of students just kind of whiff on the letters of rec and they look like they're just kind of a form draft they found somewhere on Google, and then they hand it to someone and they write their name on it. We can all tell immediately that that's what happened. So what you really want is to meet with someone who can write a strong letter of recommendation, tell them what it is you want the admissions committee to know, give them some bullet points, and have them write something that's really strong about you. That's the only pieces in admissions committee where we're able to see somebody else's perspective of you. So that's really valuable. So I would really start there. Finally, if you can, this is where networking is going to be your best friend. So if you can go to, and this is for everybody who's kind of having the same kind of challenge, if you can go to those virtual admissions events or even meet with them live, get to know them, and they can see that you come across really well, you communicate clearly, you're really excited about the program, you have kind of an idea for maybe what you even want to do, that's going to be really impactful for them and meaningful. So I would make sure that if you're feeling like you're not as competitive in some areas, make that extra effort to attend some of their events and get to know them. I think that'll really help you. Okay, next question. Number of years between undergrad and applying to MBA programs have an impact on how likely it is that you'll be accepted. So again, I think it depends on the MBA program. And it depends on the year too. So in some years, there's just a really competitive pool. We don't know how it's going to be. I mean, the job market is really interesting right now. We don't know what's going to be going on. So each year is always going to look a little bit different. I would, just again, I encourage students to think about it in 3, 4 year time frame. But if you really want to apply in 2 years, that's fine. Just know it might be a little bit more competitive to get into the really strong schools. So maybe think about your schools as far as like, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Like I always had my top schools and then my backup schools. So the backup schools were the ones I'd be, happy with. They weren't my dream schools, but if that's the only place I got in and that's what kind of worked out, I would be fine. And so think about it with that approach too. You've got these dream schools, and then you've got the ones that are kind of going to match sort of the fit of where you are as far as your work experience and what's required. The gap year is totally fine as long as you did something during that gap year. So, if you kind of sat around at home and like didn't do very much, that's not going to be very meaningful. That basically just looks like you kind of have no idea what you're doing, and which is fine. I mean, I think none of us really have that great of an idea of what we're doing all the time, but you just want your time to be meaningful. So even if you just decided you wanted to go travel or work as a tour guide somewhere for a year and that expose you to a lot of different things, That's awesome. But you know what, that's one place where the optional essay can help you explain that. Hey, I took this gap year for family reasons, or I really wanted to go travel abroad. You know, COVID was over. I'd never even left the country. I spent 6 months in France and then I did this. It opened me up to different backgrounds and experiences. That's really cool. I mean, as somebody on admissions committee, I think that was really brave and shows that you're willing to put yourself out there. So it just depends on what you're doing. If you're like, I stayed at home for a year and watch Netflix and make cookies, I'm gonna be like, I don't know if this person's motivated enough to attend the program. So just be thinking about, you know, what it is that you want to do in that gap year. Is there a master's thesis? I mean, not really. I mean, there's no thesis that's required in the program. I think you might be thinking more something that's like a some type of specialized master's program actually do have that, especially if it's like engineering and stuff like that. I think there are some programs at UCI, masters in engineering, depending on what kind of degree you want to get that would have that. That's not for MBA at UCI. It's really much more on the practical, hands-on work experience, defining what your career path is going to look like, and then just getting a lot out of the classes and within your group sessions. So I hope that helps answer the question. I don't know if there's any more left, or are we running out of time? Are we
Um,
okay for a few more?
that's it. That's it. I'm good on time. I do see that we're 5 over. So students, if you have one last question to put in the Q&A portion of this presentation, go ahead and do so. If not, Vanessa, do you have anything that you would like to share with our students, maybe where we can find you or
Yeah.
visit you or email you if we have any further questions?
Yeah, let me go ahead and this is my email address. So I know some students, it was really, really cool to see that some students were interested in some of our programs within the business school. If that is a path you want to take, please, oh, and I see another question I'll answer in a second. If that is a path that you are interested in, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Most likely, I won't be the person that you'll end up speaking with, but I can definitely get you in touch with our admissions team. We have a great admissions team that recruits for our specialty master's program, and then a separate team that recruits for our MBA program. And they love to do consultations, meet with students virtually and in person. So if you just want to get in front of a face, please let me know. I'm more than happy to set you up. I know that that's an important part of the decision-making process when it comes to, you know, should I get a master's? Should I wait and get an MBA? What do I want to do? Talking to people can really help you make that decision. So please let me know. I'd be happy to connect you with somebody on our team over there. There isn't a practicum. Internships are encouraged. We don't like force you to get one, and we don't set you up with one for the MBA program full time specifically. If you're part time, chances are you're working full time and you're not going to be doing anything else. But in the full time, yeah, I mean, pretty much 100% of the class ends up with some type of internship during the summer. So the career services team, which I'm a part of, the ones who coach the MBA students, they do a really, really fantastic job of making sure that your resume is ready, you're getting in front of employers. They want you to get that internship because it's a really helpful way to help develop that work experience, especially if you're transitioning careers, but just figure out what that next career path is going to look like for you. So even though it's not required, it's highly encouraged, and work with our career services team and they'll help you land one.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I see that we are all out of questions, and I placed your email in the chat, Vanessa. And students, as I send a follow-up email this afternoon, I will include Vanessa's email in there as well. But with that being said, thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you for your time and energy. Students, thank you all for joining us on this morning. I know you all are busy and getting ready for finals, so thank you all for joining us. And we'll be here for a little bit, but you're free to fly. So have a great rest of your day.